I was having a conversation with a friend the other day about how holding certain beliefs can literally cause you psychological harm. We started exchanging stories about our upbringing and how we were shaped by them. And she was shocked by how strongly Islam had influenced the trajectory of my life in a negative way. There were many light bulb moments, but I want to share just a few of the topics we discussed during our conversation with you today in this video. So, here are 5 ways that being raised in a religion of peace harmed me. Number one, it taught me to be blindly obedient and discouraged me from questioning anything, even to the point of dulling my curiosity and ability to think rationally. As a child, I would learn things about the prophet that just seemed so asinine, but when I pushed back, I would be met with derision or a swift smack upside the head or both. One event in particular sticks in my mind. I was around 11 and it was summer. My parents had taken us to an amusement park. I was sweating buckets in my hijab and admittedly wasn't having all that much fun standing around in those long lines. We took a break from the rides to eat lunch, and halfway through the meal, I reached for my drink only to find a dead fly floating in it. I was disgusted and asked my mom to please give me money so I could buy another one. But she refused and told me to submerge the fly and finish drinking it because of some hadith she'd read that says there's a cure for disease on a fly's wings or something. I hadn't heard of this one and looked at her like she'd lost her mind, then said something to the effect of,
"That's stupid. Use your common sense."
She hit me in the head and told me that questioning the prophet was a sin. She said I'd be tortured in my grave. I was so scared. I barely slept at all that night. Enduring repeated experiences like this in my formative years led me to become a drone, to go through life and blindly accept things without critically thinking. It's a trait that followed me into adulthood. I was so scared of displeasing my Lord that I turned my brain off so as not to incur his wrath with my discerning and sinful thoughts, which leads me into the second way this faith has harmed me: fear. I lived in a near constant state of terror. The minds of children absorb things so easily. My entire adolescence was plagued by threats of burning flesh, of skin that would grow back, only to be burned away again, of the punishments of the grave, a grave that would crush me in limbo until judgment day, of angels that would torture me inside of it, hadiths of the prophet walking by graveyards and hearing screams from its inhabitants lived rent-free in my mind. As a little girl, I longed for death. I prayed it would take me in the night while I slept, prayed it would visit me before I reached puberty so that I wouldn't be held accountable for any sins I may have unknowingly committed. This fear crippled me. It stunted my development. It poisoned me because fear is the mind killer. And the ink of this fear colored every last one of my thoughts. It fostered paranoia in me so that I I would lash out at others when I thought that they weren't fearing enough. I felt I needed to keep my peers and siblings in check because if they didn't fear as much as I did, then they would end up as fuel for the fire. This hadith about laughing less and crying more was drilled so deep into my psyche that I'm pretty sure I made it my entire fanatical personality at one point. This intense fear created a breeding ground for depression and just poor mental health in general. And that leads into the third way that I believe I was harmed by being brought up with this doctrine. It engendered a mental illness. After sessions upon sessions of learning about Islamic practices and the role they played in my upbringing, my therapist made me aware that she strongly believes there's a link between my obsessive compulsive disorder diagnosis and my relationship to this religion. Stay with me. When people hear of this disorder, the first thing they usually think of is the cleaning disease. But that's not really an all-encompassing representation of what this illness is like. For me, having it is like dealing with a little voice inside your head that constantly tells you that you are in grave danger. It warns that if you pick up a carton of milk in the grocery store with your dominant hand, something bad will happen to you. It says that if you don't drive around the block a certain number of times before parking, then unspeakable horrors will befall you. It threatens that if I don't log out of my work computer at exactly the same time every day, down to the minute, then someone close to me will die. I realize these things sound quite ridiculous to someone who doesn't suffer from this mental illness, but it is what it is. I have this disorder. My mom has it. 5 out of 7 of my siblings have it. I genuinely believe it stems in part from Islam. In the religion, there is a right and wrong hand to perform simple tasks like drinking or eating with. You must step in and out of the bathroom with a certain foot and also say what is essentially an incantation before entering it. When you leave your home every day, you should say one too for protection. You must also utter Allah's name before eating, or a jinn will eat with you. You can't blow on your food to cool it down. That's haram.
The Prophet ﷺ prohibited us from breathing in the vessel when we drink.
There's a certain way you must discard your hair strands that come out while brushing or combing, because someone might tie knots in them and curse you. I wholeheartedly believed all of these things because they were presented to me by authority figures as irrefutable facts in my formative years. My therapist and I can't really prove it outside of anecdotal evidence, but I think there's a link between these day-to-day rituals that I was expected to perform as a Muslim and my developing obsessive compulsive disorder. I'm not on medication for it, but through cognitive behavioral therapy, I've been able to reduce my symptoms and can temporarily drive back some of the most severe tendencies of the disorder. Stepping away from religious practices has also greatly diminished the frequency of intrusive thoughts as well. But mental illness or not, this is just a burdensome way to live. Very micromanaging. Even the clothes you must wear are policed, especially for women. And that brings me to the fourth way the religion of peace has brought me harm: internalized misogyny. I never realized how thoroughly I hated myself and other women for simply existing in female bodies until I started deconstructing religion. I did everything from demonizing periods to calling women out of their names just for laughing in the presence of men. I've come a long way, but I will be unlearning this for the rest of my life. I'm so deeply ashamed of how harshly I used to judge non-believing women for how they dressed and behaved. I would blame women for everything and downplay any and all abuse they received. If a story was reported on the news about an assault, I would instantly start a running list in my head of ways that it was probably the woman's fault. I would think if only she wore modest clothing and didn't prance around like an uncovered lollipop, then it would never have happened. My parents think this way, as well as my sisters, brothers, cousins, aunts, and ex-friends. I'm ashamed to admit that I thought this way once too. It's disgusting. I despise the person that I was when I was Muslim. I was the most vile and toxic being. I really thought that a woman was responsible for the actions of men. It's what I was taught. It's what my siblings are teaching their young daughters right now, that the clothes they wear have dominion over men's choices, as if a great deal of them aren't literal predators that would have intercourse with a monitor lizard or an elderly woman in a coma. You don't have to be attractive to draw the attention of a man. You just have to exist. I'm so sorry for all the ways I've harmed women with my thoughts and judgments. It's my deepest regret. I'll spend the rest of my life atoning for it. Women are important. They uphold society. Just look how quickly a population plummets when they collectively stop risking their lives to birth children. Islam paints us as lesser beings. We're not. And of all the ways I was harmed by Islam, this is the most abhorrent of them. But we've got one more to go, and I think the last reason on my list is likely the most obvious, and that's the learned intolerance of others that was instilled in me from a young age. I dismissed everyone's beliefs because through childhood indoctrination, I was certain that I was following the one true and perfect religion that was never corrupted or doctored. I thought the worst Muslim was leagues better than the non-believer, than the Christian, and especially the Jew. I was taught to be wildly anti-Semitic, and it's so jarring to see people openly being this way these days. It makes me cringe because I used to hold irrational, hate-filled beliefs about a group of people that had done nothing to me, that I had never even encountered. It's sick. The audacity of me wanting all sorts of exceptions and acceptance and special accommodations when I was a Muslim. Meanwhile, I couldn't even extend a modicum of that same courtesy to others. The community I was insulated by was very intolerant. It was to the point of hatred. I remember when the singer Aaliyah was killed in a plane crash, my teachers practically celebrated. They talked for days about the punishments they believed were being inflicted on her in the grave, and they were so overjoyed that this young, gorgeous pop star who flaunted her beauty and angelic vocals had her life cut short. They felt she got what she deserved for being a non-believing sinner, that being burned to death in the aftermath of that crash was the wrath of Allah. People say you shouldn't generalize, but my believing community, family, and friends did it to everyone constantly. I could really go on and on about how narrow-minded I used to be in service of religion, but I like to keep things as short as I can. Of course, there are many more ways I was harmed, but I wanted to condense it down to make it easier to digest. Thanks for watching this far if you made it. Also for being patient and sticking around to watch. Whenever I get a chance to upload, I know I don't post frequently. I've got so much on my plate right now, and it's about to get a lot more hectic for me because recently one of my self-published fantasy novels caught the eye of traditional publishing, and I gotta say, be careful what you wish for. I don't talk much about my personal life here to protect my identity, but I've wanted this for so long. I didn't write for years because I was told that the stories I wanted to tell were haram, and this discouraged me from cultivating my talent for most of my life. I've had to do a lot of catching up through courses and workshops. I should have made this list longer to include all the ways my creativity was killed by Islam and its hatred of individuality and all things Western. I gave up on so many of my hopes to please Arab Sky Daddy. Anyway, it's been a long-standing dream of mine to have the opportunity to be in a brick and mortar bookstore and be managed by an agency. It's like the ultimate middle finger to Islam. I'm succeeding in all the ways I was told I never should or could. It feels great. But I have to be honest, now that I have been given everything I've always wanted, I'm so overwhelmed between editing my manuscript of over 100,000 words, writing a first draft of a new dark academia project, and outlining another story in my contract on top of working my full-time job. I'm spread so thin. So I appreciate you being here through my sporadic posting. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.
Silence!